Okay, so we are over the halfway mark in September, which means not only is it time for another books recommendations video, but because October is literally right around the corner, I thought now would be the perfect time to do a mystery, thriller, horror recommendations for you guys. I know that these are all different types of genres, but I just thought that I'd compile them all together because October's coming up and it will give you some time to acquire these books if you want to read them in the scary month. If you have not seen any of my book recommendation videos before, basically what I do is I split my book recommendations up into tier levels. My tier 1 is entry level. Where should you begin if you haven't read books like these before? Then we move on to tier 2, which is a step higher. If you've read 1 or 2 horror, thriller, mystery books, maybe this is where you'd like to go. Tier 3, we go even higher again, and tier 4 is advanced. Let's start off with our tier 1 books. These are entry points for you. Maybe you haven't read a mystery, a thriller, or a horror before, and you're wondering where to start. Well, I have the best place for you to start. Not only starting off with my tier 1 books, but the first book with my tier 1 books, and that would have to be Goosebumps, Welcome to Dead House, book number 1 in the Goosebumps series. The reason why this comes first in my tier 1 of books is because of its age rating. This is a middle grade horror. In this book we are following a brother and a sister. We follow the perspective of the sister, but the brother is there most of the time. Their family has had to move interstate to a new house because their uncle has died and left them his mansion in his will. Once they get there, the children start having odd feelings about the place, and they come to find out that there is more about the house than meets the eye. So this is a great entry point. Maybe you don't want to go down middle grade lane. I don't know why, it's a fabulous book, but if you don't want to go down middle grade lane, that's absolutely fine. I have now got some YA books to show you. And we're going to start off with a YA mystery because this is not just about horror, but also mystery and thriller. And so the mystery I'm going to recommend to you is the Pretty Little Liars series by Sarah Shepard. If you've never read a mystery before, this is a great place to start. The Pretty Little Liars series revolves around 4 girls. 5 girls one night end up having a sleepover at one of the girls' barns. The next morning, one of the girls, who incidentally happens to be the queen bee of their high school, ends up going missing. The girls then start receiving stalking texts by an anonymous antagonist known only as A. A tries to divulge secrets about these girls, hence the term Pretty Little Liars. We spend the majority of the series trying to work out who A is. It can be a very thrilling ride for anyone who has not read a mystery before, so I do feel it's a good entry point. The next book that I'm going to recommend is a YA thriller for your tier 1 section, and that is One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. The premise of this book is that it is a multi-perspective. We are following 4 characters. Like this book, 5 characters, but this time it includes boys, where in this one the 5 characters are all girls. There are boys and girls. 5 characters, 5 high school students end up going into a detention, but only 4 of them get out of that detention alive. One of them dies while they are there. We don't know how they died, we do not know who killed them, but we spend the rest of the book trying to work out who it is. Penned with the writing style of multi-perspective, this book was done so incredibly well because we get to get the perspective of all of the suspects to try and work out who it was that committed this murder. Little bit of a sidebar on this one. I'm actually reading book 2 in this duology as the next book I'm reading. So One of Us is next. So I do highly recommend this one. I had a lot of fun with it and I think you will too. And my final recommendations for my tier 1 entry levels for a mystery in this case would be my only cozy mystery that I've read so far, which is The Witching Flower, book number 1 in the Spellford Cove Mysteries series by Samantha Silver. This book is absolutely fantastic. This genre, if this book is adequately representing what cozy mysteries are, then this genre is just out of this world compared to other books that I've read. It is called a cozy mystery because that's literally what it is. You feel cozy and comfortable while reading it. The basic premise of this book is that we are following a girl whose name is Robin, who receives a letter letting her know that her biological mother has died. Robin was adopted out when she was younger, so she didn't really know her blood mother. Part of the reason why she is being told this is because the mother owned a cupcake bakery, not a cupcake, but a bakery, and she has bequeathed the bakery to her blood-related daughter. So Robin travels interstate to take over the bakery business and meets some other blood relatives while she's there, and also learns that she is a witch. She's grown up all her life being very skeptical of magic and anything to do with it, and she works out she's not only a witch, but she's a kitchen witch. Then something happens where a mystery unfolds. Let's jump into my Tier 2 section. I have 2 books in my Tier 2 section. The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Okay, the basic premise of this book is that we are following a guy by the name of Aidan Bishop who wakes up in a mansion. A woman by the name of Evelyn Hardcastle has died, and he is eventually told that he has been placed into a game. When I say eventually, this is not a spoiler because it does come up early enough on in the book that I can tell you this. He is told that he has been placed into a game. And what's going to happen is every morning when he wakes up, he is going to wake up inside the body of someone who was there when at the mansion when Evelyn Hardcastle died. He needs to do what he can to figure out who killed her, and everyone else that's at this mansion also is a part of this game. Only the first person to work out who committed the murder correctly will be able to get out alive. So it is Aidan's goal to work out who killed Evelyn Hardcastle as quickly as he possibly can. Very quickly, recently I saw someone talking about this book and talking about some controversy to do with this book, and I just want to make a point about it because sometimes, not always, but sometimes I feel that people can take something and really put it out there in a way that makes it seem so completely off-putting that people don't pick up the book, when with everything being subjective, they're allowed to do that. That's fine, but I should be allowed my right to respond, and I will. What was being put out there was that there's some fat shaming that goes on in this book. I'm calling a spade a spade. You know, I much rather say the word than dance around it. I absolutely in no way advocate any sort of shaming at all. I don't want you to think this is a book version of Shallow Hell or something like that, because it's not at all. That is a really tiny section of the book. So I will quickly explain this here. On one of the days, he wakes up in the body of a plus-sized guy, and he struggles to deal with being in the body of a plus-sized guy because he has never been plus-sized. So please, let's try and keep things, you know, let's try and be as realistic as possible with things rather than blowing them out of proportion because one little thing happened. I've read so many books that have been so amazing that have 1 or 2 things here or there that probably wasn't the best thing that the author could have done for whatever reason, but it's so minute that had I made a point of it, it might have blown that incredibly minor thing out of proportion with the book. So please don't allow that to stop you from picking up the book because it is such a minute thing. Do I condone it in real life? No. Do I condone it in this book? No. Do I understand where the characters come from because he's never experienced that before? Yes, I do. So please don't let that dissuade you from picking up what is otherwise, at the very least, a brilliantly written book. The Woman Outside My Door, and it is written by Rachel Ryan. The premise of this book is that we follow a woman by the name of Georgina whose son tells her that he has met a woman who wants to be her grandmother. This weirds Georgina out because both her and her husband's mothers have passed away, so her child doesn't really have a grandmother. The more time goes on, the more the child continues to talk about his new grandmother, and Georgina's husband is convinced that he has dreamed up an imaginary friend that's playing the role of the grandmother because of the 2 deaths of their mothers. Georgina is not convinced, and so she is willing to move heaven and earth to find out what the heck is going on here. This was done so well. Rachel Ryan ticked every single box she could for this thriller book, and it just worked for me on so many different levels. But okay. You're saying, Mr. Francy, that's all wonderful, but I want to be challenged even more. Well, let's move a step up then and talk about my Tier 3 books. The Phantom of the Opera by Gaston Leroux. Now, more recently than when it was first published, this book is now classified as an adult classic. because it stands the test of time. When it was originally published as an adult horror. The reason for this is because the book opens up with two guys who end up going to an auction and buying an opera house in Paris. The first day that they arrive at the opera house, they arrive to find a note from an OG, someone that is an opera house ghost, who tells them that he would like to continue to receive the salary that he has been receiving and which he's come quite accustomed to, and that box seat number 5 should never be sold because it's always meant for him. They ask everyone who works at the opera house, these two guys, what's going on here, and everyone says, no, it's true, there's an opera house ghost, but they're quite skeptical about it. This book was fantastic. I did not know that it was a horror when I went into it because the musical adaptation done by Andrew Lloyd Webber is a romance. Andrew Lloyd Webber took creative liberties, changing the genre altogether. The original work is fantastic. If you want a horror, a good horror, a classic horror that stands the test of time, you cannot go past The Phantom of the Opera, Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. This is the 80th anniversary edition and it is a really beautiful book. This is an adult mystery, and the basic premise of this book is that we are following an unnamed protagonist. Nowhere throughout the course of the entire book is our protagonist's first name given, and I thought this was just a wonderful decision made by Daphne du Maurier because I'd never seen this before. So we follow this woman who is being treated rather poorly by a woman that's her owner. The woman who is in charge of her gets sick and bedridden one day while they're staying at a hotel. So our unnamed protagonist goes downstairs and ends up meeting a guy by the name of Maxim de Winter. Maxim de Winter is quite significantly older than her, but the two become rather smitten with each other, and before long they end up going to court and getting married. Very quickly, wham bam, and now we're married. And this is not a spoiler because it happens all within the first 2 chapters. Then the rest of the book revolves around our unnamed protagonist being back at Maxim's home, a mansion called Manderley, where she comes to find out a lot of things about his late wife by the name of Rebecca. Not only is this mystery just brilliantly written, but it is laced with gothic tones. So if you want something a little bit darker in its tone, then I definitely will recommend this book. One of the reasons why this book is placed in the Tier 3 section is because of the tougher to read writing style. Just quickly on Phantom of the Opera, and the reason why this is in the Tier 3 section is because the horror elements of this book are, in my opinion, of a Tier 3 level. So please do be mindful of that. But okay, I hear you. There are some of you out there saying, but Mr. Francy, you need to challenge me even more. I'm someone who loves my horrors, I love my thrillers, I love my mysteries, and those just aren't cutting it for me. No problem. You are what I would call the advanced horror thriller mystery reader. And welcome to your tier now, Tier 4. I have 2 books for this tier, but hopefully, over the course of time, I will read more books that I can place onto this tier, but at least this will get you started. Is a book that I actually don't own, so I'm going to put a picture of it up on the screen. The reason I don't own this book is because it's not available as a physical book. I'm so glad that I found out about it though, because it was worth every moment of listening to the audio version, and that book would have to be Cenote by Sean Horton. It is a novella. It is incredibly short, but that doesn't mean that Sean Horton does not pack a massively powerful punch with this book. So the basic premise that I can give you, considering how short it is that we are following, it's dual perspective. We follow a man and a woman. A woman has traveled over somewhere, I think to Mexico, and she meets a guy, and this is her last day she's there, so they've had some kind of a holiday fling. She's about to go home, but as they're taking one last stroll along the beach, they fall into a cenote, which is basically like a cave or a cavern that is filled with water. And generally speaking, it's really hard to escape from. And in this case, it is too. The only thing I can tell you, because otherwise we're going to get into way too many spoilers, is that it is dark, it is cold, and they are not alone. The next book I would recommend that you move on to would be this book, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. I have spoken about this book in my classics recommendations, but just as with The Phantom of the Opera, when this book was originally released, it was originally released as an adult horror. So the basic premise of this book, again it's short so there's not a lot I can say, is that we're following a man by the name of Dorian Gray who, according to an artist who is painting him in the very first chapter, is the most beautiful man in all of the land. The book takes place in England. So Dorian starts getting a really big head, but then the artist's companion says to him something along the lines of, and I'm paraphrasing here, enjoy it now because when you get older, you'll get wrinkly and your looks will fade. So Dorian makes a wish to never grow old. That wish comes about with a ton of consequences. And the final book that I'm going to recommend for you, my final tier 4 book, is actually this book, The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I categorize this book as an adult historical fiction, but in fact the publishers categorize this book as an adult mystery. We follow 3 characters. 2 characters we are following from the past, and 1 character we follow in the present. The characters that we follow in the past are Nell and Eliza. Nell runs an apothecary where she sells health remedies for women, and she also sells poisons. She will only sell to women health remedies or poisons to get back at their torturous husbands. Do you have any mysteries, horrors, or thrillers that you'd like to recommend everyone, including myself? If you do, let us all know in the comment section below. But in the meantime, that is where I am going to leave it, letting you guys go with peace, blessings, and so much love. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and I'll see you again soon. Mwah! Good night, and happy reading!